Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Kenton Hornbeck back at y'all with the BeckDeck podcast. Recording on a Saturday here. I'm joined by Logan Decker, co-host of the BeckDeck podcast. Logan, how are we doing? Super Bowl Eve.
Yeah, I'm excited, man. This is one of those Super Bowls that, for whatever reason, is going underneath the radar, I feel like, in the media. But I haven't been excited for a Super Bowl where we haven't seen these teams in a while. And it's like, for me, it's refreshing because it's like, oh, I don't have to listen to the Kansas City Chiefs rhetoric for the fifth time in a row, or oh, here comes the Eagles. It's just fresh to watch two teams that's taken a long time to be back here, and it's a rematch, and we talked about that last week. So I'm very excited to see these defenses and which quarterback story is going to pop out overhead. The sophomore, new face of the league potentially, or we're going to see a career resurgence for Sam Darnold. So it's exciting either way. I don't particularly have any big plans tomorrow. I'm just going to be chilling on the couch, watching the game, eating some nachos, just a typical football food, some wings, and go from there. What about you? What's your plans for the Super Bowl?
I'm heading down to Pendleton County, just going to watch the game with my girlfriend and my parents, pretty much. Same deal, eating nachos, wings, meatballs, whatever, regular football foods. Nothing crazy. I've already drinking enough alcohol this weekend. I think I'm all right on that. Just going to kind of coast, kind of cruise, and hopefully watch New England lose on Sunday, which I am pretty excited for. But you kind of mentioned the narratives around Sam Darnold, like what could be new face of the league, or this guy revives his career. And last week, after we hopped off the pod, we kind of had an extension conversation that went maybe like 20 minutes about QB development, and that stemmed from Sam Darnold. And I thought this would be a good topic for this week, essentially the QB development episode, the state of the quarterback episode, where we did some research and essentially found that a lot of older players, a lot of older quarterbacks think that QB development is really, really struggling right now at the college level in addition to the NFL. And that is impacting the game overall. I agree with a lot of this. I think you do as well. So we're going to jump into that today, starting from the beginning. I mean, I'll tee it up this way. Tom Brady, greatest quarterback of all time, also arguably the greatest quarterback development prospect of all time in terms of going from a sixth-round draft pick to a seven-time Super Bowl champion, multiple-time league MVP. That's pure development on display. So if anybody would have a rational insight about this, it would be Tom Brady, from my perspective. Well, Tom Brady seems to think that quarterback development is really, really, really struggling in the contemporary NFL. I would agree with that. One quote that he gave on a podcast, I can't remember what podcast, but I think this was semi-recently. Brady said, quote, "I don't believe the quarterback position is as mentally developed as it was when I entered the league. There was a premium on understanding defenses, understanding matchups, pre-snap reads. You'll truly give your team the best chance to win, to be a field general." End quote. I think that says it all right here, because both you and I remember a couple weeks ago when we saw old man Phillip Rivers calling out pre-snap reads. His arm was shot, but his mind was sharp. And for young quarterbacks in this league, it seems like their mind is shot and their arms are alive, essentially. And they're not getting the accurate, they're not developing properly, essentially. So what is your take on how Brady feels about this and the overall state of quarterback development?
I mean, I agree with Brady. I think we see it on the field. I feel like maybe this is just, recency bias, but how many of these quarterbacks that have come out, let's say in the first round, and we're seeing guys that maybe had an elite 1 year in college, or they've had a shortened time in college, where it's really based on more of the athletics. How's their arm strength? What is their running capabilities? And we've seen guys who have either fallen off the cliff pretty quickly to where they didn't have a starting job after a handful of years, or they got the opportunity and they blew it, or you have guys that have stayed in the league but have not achieved the success that has been lauded for them to achieve. Now, this goes all the way up and down the ranks. I'm not going to throw out individual quarterbacks just yet or anything like that. You mentioned the Tom Brady quote, and I mentioned this in our extended discussion after the pod, is that my favorite on-camera interaction with this is you're watching, like, football sicko nuthead John Gruden. He's sitting there doing his interview with his quarterback camp, and he's got the Giants quarterback, Dart, and he's sitting there, and he's like, all right, show me your cadence. Jackson Dart's just standing there. John Gruden's like, that's it? That's it? Does it again. You're seeing this, basically the mental capacity, or I should say the recognition of complex defenses. It doesn't exist in the college game. And part of that, and this is one of the first points I want to go into, is that this is before NIL. So NIL is a part of this. I'm going to laud this point up before giving it back over to you, before jumping in the NIL. But there's always been a difference between offensive schemes in the college game versus the NFL. This has been going on for decades and decades. But what we've seen more recently is that, instead of a mixture of all these different programs having, pro-style offense, West Coast options, power spreads, is that a lot of these teams, and you'll see it, count the plays on your next college football. We're going to have to wait till next season, but count them. How many of these plays are RPOs? How many of these plays are half reads, first read concepts? And the design is to get the ball out efficiently. Basically, the offense is trying to structure it to minimize the mental load rather than expand upon it. A lot of these quarterbacks in college, you could probably count on one hand how many of them have the go-ahead from their coach, their offensive coordinator, to make changes at the line of scrimmage. You don't see it. They have the headsets, they're making the plays for them. They do not get to make the changes that they want. And basically, what happens is, also on the defensive side, it's to the same degree, where you're not seeing very complex defenses for the same part at the college level, where they're just trying to get guys in there. Like I said, I wasn't going to go into the transfer portal, but that's a big part of this. But they're not seeing these post-snap rotations, the late safety movements, these defensive structures that are trying to manipulate the quarterback's eyes. So the defense lines up, and they're basically showing their hand right out of the gate. Okay, they don't do a lot of stunts. They don't drop a linebacker back into coverage when they're showing a blitz. It doesn't happen a lot at the college game. And what happens is, a college quarterback does not get exposed to these chaotic situations regularly. And oftentimes behind these bigger programs, which a lot of these quarterbacks are getting drafted in these higher rounds, Texas, pick your university that has just phenomenal athletes all across the board, is that they're behind, let's say, dominant offensive lines. They're behind, they have some amazing wide receivers that they're going to throw to. And that all these play calls are trying to manufacture space. They're not trying to, in particular, a lot of these plays are not designed based on the talent of the quarterback, but it's the scheme itself. And to a degree, that's happening at the NFL level. You'll see that. But like you said with Phillip Rivers and some of the older generation, they manipulate everything at the line. They see it. They pre-read it. They know what's coming. And that's why Phillip Rivers had a degree of success despite coming back at his age and having multiple years off. His arm is shot, but his mind is sharp, so he's able to drive the ball down the field and look solid doing it, better than, you could say, a third of the league at his age, because he's able to manipulate everything. That's why Aaron Rodgers is still playing that he is. He's lost a step. He doesn't have the same power that he did 10 years ago. But in terms of offensive mind, I guarantee you he's probably top 5 in the NFL currently in how to manipulate a defense. And the problem is also in terms of the college schedule and in terms of the talent around them. If you're playing, let's just say, I'm going to pick a college. let's say Ohio State, you're playing in the Big Ten. There's probably about 4 or 5 teams in the Big Ten every year that you need to legitimately be concerned about, where half of your schedule you could say is if they lost to any of those games that you don't have marked on your calendar, then it's an upset. It's shocking. It's on it's on ESPN. It's on these shows, and they're talking about it. So my point is that they are not playing against the highest standard of athletes within even their own conference. You get to the NFL, and everybody is good. Everybody's got big titles that they won awards potentially while they're in college. All SEC, third team, whatever it might be. Is that the talent on the NFL is not lacking. And on college, you can have the discrepancy. So just without the NIL, the transfer discussion, a big part of it is simplification of the offense, the defense, and the fact basically the difference in talent that's on the field that you play every week versus the NFL where all those are eliminated.
I'm with you. I think the college game and its simplicity or its relative simplicity has impacted the overall development of quarterbacks when they get in the NFL. Because like you were saying, they're not used to making certain reads. They're not used to looking at the way certain defenses are lining up before the snap, even if those defenses are more simplistic at the college level, kind of like you were explaining a second ago. One thing I think that the NFL is doing wrong in terms of, I'll say this. I guess it's very interesting when you take a step back and look at what guys succeed and what guys don't end up succeeding. I think the way people kind of talk about college quarterbacks when they're getting drafted into the NFL is a little bit like NBA superstars. They want to do the raw prospect. He's fast. He's got a big arm. All of these type of attributes that you could possibly want in an NFL player. And I think the paradox with the quarterback is that's all very important, but you also have to have a certain mental and intangible understanding of the game in order to make yourself a successful quarterback. A lot happens in between your ears. A lot happens before the snap. And if you don't have to develop that skill set in college because the program you go to is running a certain style of offense and the offensive coordinator wants you to explicitly execute upon that scheme, you're really not going to get any opportunity to either freelance or learn the intricacies of making those reads before the snap or doing, whatever Phillip Rivers learned over his career and we saw at the end of the season. You're not going to learn how to do that. And so you come into the NFL where the defenses are elite, and the defensive coordinators and the schemers and everything, they're so good, they're just going to tear you apart. And these guys are even more behind than I felt like they were when we were growing up. Certainly, what you said about Aaron Rodgers is absolutely correct. I think Aaron Rodgers is still a viable NFL quarterback at this point in time, even with his limited arm strength relative to what he had. He's still able to do it because of his mental edge over the defense, over some defensive coordinators, over a lot of his quarterback opponents. Phillip Rivers, same thing. Drew Brees was able to hold on. If his shoulder didn't go the way of the wind, I think Drew Brees would have been playing longer. We saw Tom Brady, the greatest to ever do it. He played till 45 years old. Why? Because he was able to continuously develop his mental edge over his career. Are coaches playing to win in college, or are they playing to develop? And if you're hired to win games, that makes sense to me, right? It's not your responsibility to just be Cliff Kingsbury and develop Patrick Mahomes or Kyler Murray or whatever. Yes, those guys are great and you're still going to win some games, but you're hired, you're paid $5 to $10 million a year to win the game. And in order to do that, a lot of these guys are like, we just need you to execute the offense if you're the quarterback. And it prevents them from being able to go develop those other skills, as I was saying earlier. A lot of the offensive schemes are so simple now in college, as I was saying earlier, that they're not able to develop proper, intangibles, the way they read the game. And that ultimately impacts their value to some of these like coaches coming into the league. So if they're not ready upon draft day to have some like baseline level of the way to properly read defenses, that means the NFL in turn, when they take these guys, is going to have to dumb down what they're doing with these guys a little bit, especially if they plan on playing them earlier in their careers or right off the bat. I think it's so key. Tom Brady said this. I know other quarterbacks who have retired have said this, and it's also a trope. But I do think it's key to let a guy sit for a year maybe and develop, learn how to play the game, how to prepare and read defenses by sitting behind someone who's a veteran player who has done this as a professional for a long enough time. And you see that manifest in guys like Patrick Mahomes, who's a famous example, Alex Smith, who was not good right off the rip in San Francisco in his career. He also had to develop. He got thrown into the fire. He didn't play very well and then ultimately learned how to become a quarterback. He was able to transfer that knowledge on to Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes became one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Tom Brady sat behind Drew Bledsoe, famous quarterback, was a Pro Bowler for the Patriots in the 90s. He was former number 1 overall pick. You can't tell me that didn't help Tom Brady get better, learning, and through osmosis, being around all of that. And so when the guys who are getting drafted now, who have less experience or are running simple offenses, are just thrown into the fire and they really don't have any concept of how to do these more complex schemes, the coaches in the NFL have to dumb down what they're doing, and I think it hurts the overall product. And we end up watching 10 to 12 teams every year with bad quarterback situations play bad football because of this development pipeline that's broken, in my opinion.
Yeah, you had mentioned in terms of the one point I want to pick up off on is like, are these college coaches, are they trying to win or are they trying to develop? And it's gotten to the point with the NIL and how quickly coaches even move around the country that has taken a more of a hit in recent times, in the past 5 years. And it's the desire is no longer to try to teach a quarterback to be able to read the defense. We know that. The point is you need to get a quarterback that fits in your system as functionally and as quickly as possible. And with the transfer portal and the acceleration of the recruiting, the coaches, especially at these bigger programs, don't have the luxury of building a multi-year developmental, program, a track for a player. These quarterbacks that arrive are expected to play immediately. And it doesn't help that at the college level. If you look at any major university, look at the coaching staff, I kid you not, about name any program you have it, and they switch offensive coordinators like every 1 to 2 years because that's where job opening here, job opening there, better upgrade here, or whatever it might be. So these younger players are playing in different tweaks of the same system or potentially even completely different systems every single year. And what you're seeing is that even these, because the value is being placed on guys that are in their 4th year, 5th year, 6th year coming into play at these bigger programs, is that you're not traditionally seeing like a quarterback at Georgia or Ohio State that's been on the bench for 2 to 3 years sitting there developing, and then he comes out and he has a good 1 to 2 year run, and then he goes off to the NFL. And that stability is not just at, or I should say instability, is not just at the college level, but it's the same thing we're seeing in the NFL. How many times have we seen, especially in the past 2 to 3 years, that the preference for a new head coach in the league is an offensive coordinator? Or you pull up the graphic, I'm sure you know this pretty well, is that, if you look at Jalen Hurts' career, he's had a different offensive coordinator almost every single year from college all the way up to now. It's when you're seeing all these changes in a system constantly, and then your preference at the college level is just to start the most ready guy. You're from bottom to the top is that you're not getting guys that get the chance of development. So when you spend a high draft pick on somebody, especially now, since I call it the Sam Bradford effect, where he was essentially the last quarterback to get a super duper contract out of, coming into the year's rookie, and that didn't work out for the Rams, and so the NFL decided to do the rookie wage scale, and what happened is now you have, especially for a first-round quarterback, you have 5 years to figure out this if he's the guy. So there's incentive to put your high draft picks in there early, especially if you're dealing with I'm going to pick on a team like the Giants with Brian Daboll and Joe Sheen, where they're trying to save their jobs. So you could make the argument, and even though he had moments where he's shown, but Jackson Dart, for example, probably should have sat just cooking for the entire year, not just doing 4, 5, 6 games and coming in. But because their job was on the line, they forced him out there. So you're having with this, the rookie scale, the wages, is that they are being forced to kind of be put in the situations, and they're trying to, you can make a proponent, you get a rookie quarterback, and he's on this cheap deal, and you're going to build up the rest of the team. And then if he's not the guy, potentially like Minnesota Vikings right now with McCarthy, you're kind of sitting there like, oh shit, we put all of our eggs in the wrong basket. What do we do now? And so now everybody's kind of scurrying. They're trying to figure it out. And this is why McCarthy, even though this is going to be entering his year 3 and he's never played a full season, there's already talks about him potentially, maybe they bring in another quarterback and McCarthy sits again. And they just blew this first-round draft pick for nothing. And it's just wild because you don't see the consistency anymore out of even the NFL in terms of the coaching changes and how much is jumping around. And you see a guy, and it's very few nowadays, but I think my favorite example in the recent NFL is Brock Purdy, where he is the guy that he didn't come out immediately. He's the 6th-round draft pick. He obviously did not have the phenomenal athletics, but being in Shanahan's system for multiple years before really getting the chance to go, and now look at it, you can make the argument that he's a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, and he is the reason why, even though Mac Jones came in and played for him pretty well this year, Brock Purdy kept that team afloat. He was the reason that they got to the playoffs because he got the time to develop and sit and use your biology term, your osmosis, my favorite term of the day so far. But it's what happens is, and I think they look at it from an analytical standpoint, and they forget the emotional intangibles of it. If you send a guy out there that's not too early, he's going to get his confidence broken down. Especially if you pair him up with a mediocre play caller and a schemer, it's probably going to fail. And you got to have all the right pieces in place to develop a quarterback right off the get-go. Throw him in the fire. You got to have pieces, not just talent-wise, but also the good coaching staff behind it. And to be quite frank, there's not a lot of the teams in the NFL that have that or potentially ever had that all in one point right now. And that's why you've seen, even though Josh Allen has developed really well, the Bills just couldn't put all the pieces together. And that's why, you still have no Super Bowl after all this time. And now you're having all this change in your front office, and your head coach, Sean McDermott's gone, who's been, you could argue, the best coach in Bills history in terms of winning percentage. It's the time frame, because you're seeing all of these coaches get fired so quickly too. That's where the rushed progress is coming in, and I think that's where you're seeing guys that not that I want to jump in this point just yet because I want to let you back in, but this is why we're seeing particular some career resurgence out of some guys, or we have already seen it.
Brock Purdy is a really good – I'm glad you brought up Brock Purdy because he's the kind of quarterback prospect, although he was undersized, I believe he's only like 6 foot or 6'1". I feel like he was the type of quarterback prospect who maybe 20, 25 years ago would have been more valuable of a prospect as opposed to what people are kind of looking at now in terms of scouting that prioritizes like raw athleticism and physical traits over processing ability, leadership, coachability. There's an article posted to The Athletic that I read in anticipation of our podcast by Zach Kiefer, who was a Colts beat writer, he still may be, called The Bust Files, How NFL Teams Break Young Quarterbacks. And the article essentially starts off with Anthony Richardson, who is a bust by and large in the NFL, has ran into a lot of issues that we've talked about through this pod. Not a very good processor, didn't really play a lot in college, a lot of physical traits, but lacks in the mental department and hasn't been able to develop that because the Colts were in a situation where they were more inclined to prioritize winning rather than quarterback development, and I don't think those things mix very well. That's why Anthony Richardson hasn't worked out as a prospect. But anyway, the article talks about Anthony Richardson, his benching, and the Zach Kiefer interviews Peyton Manning, Troy Aikman, Kevin O'Connell, current Minnesota Vikings head coach, and the aforementioned Alex Smith to talk about why organizations are failing young quarterbacks. And a couple of them, just like I mentioned earlier, a couple of the points they bring up is scouting that prioritizes physical traits over processing leadership ability, coachability, and intangibles, constant coaching and system changes, as you were mentioning, pressure from owners and fans to play rookies immediately. That can't be discounted. And then also poor roster infrastructure. The famous example is, although he worked out because he was such a great prospect, Andrew Luck had a horrible offensive line that shortened his career just blatantly because he got hurt playing behind a bad offensive line. He sustained a number of injuries that took his focus away from developing as a quarterback and ruined his love for the game. So all of those things compounded on top of each other, and those 4 points are really why we have issues with college quarterbacks coming to the NFL and succeeding, because even though the colleges aren't incentivized to develop the quarterbacks properly, and the NFL is then taking these guys and throwing them in the fire. The situations aren't always conducive to being developed properly. So to take it back to Brock Purdy, like I was saying, he was a kind of player that I think would have been more valuable as a draft prospect 20, 25 years ago when we were growing up, because the prototypical quarterback was kind of like Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger, Tony Romo, Phillip Rivers, these pocket passers who, process, make reads before the snap. Those were the best players in the NFL, and as college got obsessed with the spread offense and it went toward a tempo and speed type of game, less colleges started running the pro-style offense, and the players who were more dual-threat quarterbacks who maybe didn't have that skill set quite developed, the mental skill set quite developed, became a higher priority because those were the guys who could best run this like run-and-gun, speed-style tempo offense. And so when that became the meta, that trickled into the NFL, and then the pipeline became overcrowded with guys who are those like dual threat, fast tempo dudes, and that's all they know how to do. And then when you find a guy like Brock Purdy in the draft and you have a smart offensive coordinator, and the guy, he's got enough physical tools, but he's got the mental edge and mental skill set to be able to succeed at this level because he knows more than his contemporary, draft prospects or young quarterbacks or whatever. So I think he's more conducive to success, and that's why you see a guy like Brock Purdy succeed. It doesn't all the time happen. There were mediocre pro-style quarterbacks when we were growing up. God, there were so many of them, literally. So I don't want to ding the modern guys by saying that all the old quarterbacks were better, but I do think this is true, is there's more bad young quarterbacks now. And to be frank, the highest echelon of quarterback when we were growing up was better. It just was. This isn't like an NBA old head argument. I just think this is objectively true. Objectively. Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger, Peyton Manning, all of those guys. Honestly, Patrick Mahomes won a lot, and I'll throw him in that category. But I think, and you could talk about Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, but all those dudes are better essentially than Joe Burrow, in my opinion. I mean, if they were, I'd take almost any quarterback from that era, not like from the highest echelons, over, a top tier quarterback now. I just would, because I'd be more confident that they'd be able to play well. I mean, actually, let me bring it here. The perfect example, Matthew Stafford won an MVP in his age 38 season. He is a pro-style quarterback. And again, it doesn't have all what to do with the pro-style quarterback specifically, but he'd played since 2009. He was able to learn and make pre-snap reads. There aren't guys doing that, and it's such an advantage for him because he still has the physical skills from being just a freak athlete that he's able to log a MVP at age 38 when 7-8 years ago, Matt Stafford was a pretty good quarterback. He was like a top 15 quarterback. He had the 5,000-yard season. The Lions never really won anything, but we were never talking about Matt Stafford could be a Hall of Famer. And here he is, because because of the era that's been ushered in, because he's savvy and smart and he's Matt Stafford, has now become the best quarterback in the league because all the other quarterbacks, frankly, aren't very good.
Yeah, I'm also in the same realm where and maybe this is just the era bias we were in, but I agree, that class of quarterbacks that we had growing up and all the names that you listed and the guys that we've already talked about, it was phenomenal quarterback play. I felt like the defenses at that time, you didn't have as many penalties in terms of like how much it was helping the offense as well. And they had to really, really work at the mental aspect in order to gain an advantage in that point where the offense didn't get the same type of advantage that they do in today's game from ref ball. And in terms of like, I just want to put on everybody's mind, because we probably have forgotten about this over time, is that having a quarterback sit for an extended time period is not something that is relatively new either. But I want to take it back to this. So the most recent one we can probably think of is Jordan Love. He sat for, 3 years behind Aaron Rodgers, and I could unequivocally say that has helped Jordan Love out in his career more than anything else. He is a good quarterback. You could make an argument maybe he's a top 10, top 15 right now, but he was not ready coming out of Utah State. But some of the guys I want to post to in the past is, so we talked about Phillip Rivers. Obviously, with that draft debacle, basically Eli Manning did not want to go to the Chargers, and that's basically the Chargers and the Giants worked out a trade, and Phillip Rivers was now going to San Diego. Phillip Rivers didn't start for 2 years. He sat on the bench for 2. Can you imagine in today's NFL if you took a guy in your top 5 pick and we're just going to sit him? 2 years. I mean, Jordan Love's back at the end of the round, but can you imagine this is our franchise guy, and you got to wait. You got to wait because he's not ready. I don't think the front offices could be able to handle, and the ownership could be able to handle that amount of pressure that we would see in today's game. But not only just Phillip Rivers, but, I'd mention Aaron Rodgers. Same thing, sat full 3 seasons behind Brett Favre. Carson Palmer, first overall pick, did not start a game as a rookie with the Bengals. And before his knee got shredded, he was supposed to be the guy for the Bengals. This is going to be the one that turns it all around. And what happens is when you're throwing a guy into the fire like that who doesn't have the awareness, you're going to have injuries that happen, whether they hold on to the ball for too long and they take sacks. Not necessarily, they don't need to take those sacks, or maybe you have too many bad balls. You don't know how to read the defense. Oh, there's an interception right out of the gate. And it just, not just in preparation just for how to read the defense, but just how to protect yourself as well. Because one of my favorite stories, and I'm probably going to butcher it a little bit, but it's a Peyton Manning story, and it was during his rookie year. not only that, the amount of patience that you had to have for a rookie quarterback back then was much more, much extended compared to now. Where I believe Peyton's season, he threw more interceptions than he did touchdowns. And it was, I don't remember the defender that was on his team, or it was offensive lineman or something like that was also with him on the Colts. And basically Peyton Manning was just continuing to say, I thought he wouldn't get there. I thought he wouldn't do this. And whoever it was, one of his teammates was basically like, Peyton, this is the NFL. They're going to get there. Everybody is there. And it took Peyton, a Hall of Famer, all-time great, the man that I despised the most growing up was Peyton Manning. And I can recognize that the Colts had the patience to set him, to let him learn, let him develop. He got thrown right into the gate, unlike some of these other guys, but that's the key. They're just be patient. Be patient. Be patient. You don't see that anymore. I mean, we've already seen Bryce Young get benched. There's talking about C.J. Stroud getting thrown out of the Texans right now. You know, there's a time before he got the big contract extension, and quite frankly, he balled out for, let's say, the past 20 games. Trevor Lawrence is finally showing some worth, even though he was the first overall pick. And people, and I'll admit myself, I was part of the group that was like, I don't think he's not hot shit. I think he's overrated. But then all of a sudden, it's like, well, he's balling out. He looked like the guy that he was supposed to be. He finally found the coach that could put it all together for him. And that's our point, is that to the staff, you got to put it all together. And it's so hard to do that because you have to hit well in all your drafts. You have to make sure you retain your talented staff. It's very, very difficult. But there's teams that do it. We see it every year. There's a reason why there's an upper echelon of teams, and there's a reason why some teams are stuck at the bottom. Despite how many injuries they've had, injury-riddled seasons past few years, the 49ers have been, for the large part, in the past decade, in the mix. Well, shit, how many times have they shown up to the Super Bowl for the NFC? Unfortunately, they haven't won, but it just shows to how good the foundation is for that franchise, how good they are at developing players, how good they are at keeping their staff on there. Because you always hear about so many people coming out from the different trees, or, for the third year in a row, different offensive coordinator from the Buccaneers gets hired. But you're looking at, the 49ers, they're able to always maintain their roster, and if somebody leaves, they bring them back. That's what they did with Robert Saleh this past season. So it's when you have a regime that's set and knows it just knows the vision with everybody. You can get somebody to agree and know that it's going to take time. You're going to have so much more success as a franchise in developing any player, let alone a quarterback. Because you got to think, even though the 49ers are not perfect, hell, in the same draft they took Brock Purdy. I'm forgetting his name, but they took the guy from North Dakota State with the third overall pick.
Trey Lance.
They took Trey Lance, and to be honest with you, Trey Lance didn't look bad coming in. He just got hurt early. Brock Purdy stepped in, played some meaningful time, and he looked solid. He took the job. And so the 49ers, even though they're a good organization, they still make mistakes. And I think, hey, it just so happens you just drafted, one of the best quarterbacks in the 6th round, probably since Tom Brady, to cover up that mistake that you made. And guess what? Because of that mistake that they had made, even though it happened, nobody got fired for it because they had the patience. They're like, all right, let's work at him with this piece. And you are not going to get that level of patience. Let's just say at the ownership level, with probably about half of the league. And some of that patience is great, and some of that patience will shoot you in the foot, but that's a different conversation. The patience that shoots you in the foot means you don't have the other people in your front office to speed it along in a, let's say, mindful, correct manner.
The Brock Purdy, Trey Lance thing is interesting because the way I view it, the 49ers wanted to go in a direction that was more, spread, not spread, but like quick tempo, whatever. Trey Lance was the quarterback who could unlock that style for them. And what happened was, because they also had Brock Purdy, is Brock Purdy just brought him back down to, hey, He's a classic quarterback, and this works in the NFL no matter, how you run your team. It works, and Brock was able to take the 49ers to a Super Bowl, and Trey Lance is on the fringe of the league. Now, Trey got hurt. He didn't look terrible in his limited time. We watched him play for San Francisco, but it was clear that it wasn't exactly what they wanted. And if they were committed, like you were mentioning about the Colts and Peyton Manning, if they were actually committed to Trey Lance, they wouldn't have moved off of him so fast. I think they knew that Lance was a lost cause in the 49ers organization. They moved off of him. Brock Purdy steps in. 49ers are still good. Saves everybody's job. They're still one of the best teams in the league, although they do play next to like a nuclear reactor, so half their team is hurt. But that's a great example because it just kind of shows you where the teams are at in terms of what quarterback traits they are prioritizing when they're drafting. Another thing I want to bring up, and I was kind of hinting at this earlier in one of my other points, and I think this is interesting. And I'll take it to basketball for a second, and I don't think it's very easy to compare football and basketball. I just want to say that outright. However, in basketball, the meta for the longest time in the draft was don't take any older players. Don't take any older players because there's not as much time for them to, their ceilings have been reached in college as opposed to getting a younger guy on a cheaper contract and having him grow into being a superstar level player. You can't do that with a guy who's played 4 years in college and he's 22, 23. That upside has probably been extinguished, or he's a known quantity. Maybe valuable for being a role player, not so much to build your franchise around. But when it comes to the NFL in the past couple of years, and I think this is very fascinating. So I'll bring it to Anthony Richardson really quick. Anthony Richardson famously only started, 11, 12 games at the University of Florida. Very mediocre games. Trey Lance, guy we just talked about, didn't start very many games at North Dakota State at a lesser level than Anthony Richardson was playing. Starts seem to matter. You want guys who have started a lot of games, a lot of big games in college. No matter where the development scale or pendulum or whatever is, college football produces big moments, high-pressure situations, no matter what the development level is. And you need a guy who's seen a bunch of those. He's stoic. He knows how to prepare for a game properly, get up for a game like that. And that is a transferable skill to the NFL. We've seen older quarterbacks start to go in the first round and become franchise QBs. And when I say older, I don't mean like 21-year-old guys. I'm talking like 23, 24-year-old players. The most famous example of this, or famous couple examples, is Bo Nix, who's now the starting quarterback for the Denver Broncos. He led his team to a first-place finish in the AFC during the regular season, won the division, a very tough division, I might add, in his second year. I wouldn't call Bo Nix one of the best quarterbacks in the league, but Bo Nix is an upper echelon quarterback, and that just goes to show you what kind of situation we're in with quarterback development if Bo Nix is an upper-tier quarterback. But Bo Nix played at Auburn for, 2-3 years, and then he played at Oregon for 2 more years. He had 5 seasons of being a starting quarterback in high-level college football. That has to count for something, and a smart coach like Sean Payton recognizes that. And he knows a guy like Bo Nix, because he's mature, because he's a little older, is probably going to listen a little more and be susceptible to coaching because he's been coached for 5 years, and he also knows how to prepare for a game. Same thing with Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels was a high-level high school prospect. He was a 5-star recruit, committed to Arizona State. Weird commitment. I don't really know why. Arizona State doesn't usually get those kind of players, but regardless, went to Arizona State and didn't play very well, was labeled a bust. Jaden Daniels goes to LSU, wins the Heisman Trophy. He's an older quarterback, gets drafted by the Washington Commanders in his rookie year. he becomes one of the better quarterbacks in the league and leads them to the NFC Championship game as a rookie. Now, obviously, he was hurt this year, but I would think that Jaden will rebound somewhat next year. I don't foresee a CJ Stroud type of deal with Jaden Daniels, but I could be wrong. Those are two key examples of players, quarterbacks more specifically, who were older, drafted in the first round. And I think you're going to see a little bit more of that because who is the number 1 overall pick projected to be this year? Well, it's Fernando Mendoza, who played a couple years at Cal, played at Indiana, was a senior. Now he's projected to go to the Raiders, number 1 overall. He won the Heisman Trophy. Fernando Mendoza developed over his 4 years. He learned how to play quarterback. He was not a high-level recruit, but now he's in a position to be a high-level recruit because he learned, he got up for big games. He took the lessons from Coach Signetti and whoever coached him at Cal to put himself into a position to win games and be a good quarterback. And when he goes to the NFL, he's still going to have to be developed. I think we all recognize this. I don't think he's a guy that's going to come in and immediately be good. You don't usually see that with quarterbacks anyway. But these older guys are becoming more valuable prospects because youth seems to be an indicator of inexperience. And when you can't hitch your wagon to a guy who doesn't have, as an NFL franchise, with so much riding on the line, fan expectations, money, you can't hitch your wagon to a guy who doesn't have that experience. And the last example I'll bring up is the Bengals quarterback, Joe Burrow, played 3 years at Ohio State, 2 or 3 years at Ohio State, didn't play really, developed. Then he went to LSU at Orgeron. The first year, he was all right. He was okay. The next year, he becomes one of the best quarterbacks in college football, goes to the NFL, second year leads the lowly Cincinnati Bengals to the Super Bowl. That's what I think is interesting in terms of, hey, we see a development gap here. We would almost rather take a chance on this older guy. Maybe we don't have as much, committed to him in terms of developing or super star potential. However, we know this guy's going to come in and be competent. And I think competence at this point in time, you'd rather have that floor than just have an Anthony Richardson and a bust. No matter how tantalizing the media makes these skills out to be. They think these guys are quarterbacks are not NBA superstars. I hate that comparison. I think I said it earlier. People like to do that as kind of a media analogy. I don't think it's very apt. Football is so different from basketball. Sometimes it's convenient to compare the two, but really they aren't very comparable.
I think you hit the nail on the head of where the NFL is going to go in the near future with this, is that we have seen the past 5 years that a lot of teams are preferring to draft a guy that's played for 5, 6 years. And because of, they're not getting the development from the coaches at the college level, per se, most of them, we're going to take the guy that's played the most, that's been in the fire the most. That way when he comes out, he'll already have as much exposure to an NFL-like scenario as humanly possible. And I think you're going to see, especially with, it's going to be reinforced from the college level simply because of the NIL. Because your guys are like, if I'm sitting here projected to be a second-round quarterback, I'm just going to take another whatever, $5-10 million deal to work with this team and see if I can go boost up to be in the first round with this team. So it's one of those things where it's like I talked about in the beginning how there is some negative reinforcement, but in a way, this might actually work in the NFL's favor because you're getting guys with a lot of experience coming out. I think you're going to see a lot of teams, especially in the past few years, that have taken an unproven guy has been shown less reliable than taking Joe Burrow, Jaden Daniels. That you went down the whole list there. I could say even at the NFL level, he hasn't shown it yet. Like Cam Ward, same. He's 23 years old. He's 22. He's kind of a little bit younger, but by the time he gets to the season, he'll be 23. So you're going to see a lot of guys, especially I think with this next draft class especially, you're going to have a ton of guys coming out who have to be forced out because, hey, these are I want to say next year is the last of the COVID class, where they got extra years in order to play. So you're going to see a lot of quarterbacks coming out of this class. And I think for a lot of teams, this could be their ability to reset going forward. Maybe this is I'm thinking of the Dolphins off the top of my head. It's like, hey, you're stuck with Tua right now in the contract. Might as well take a guy in this next draft, let him cook in your system for a year or two. Then you can offload Tua. And there you go. You got a guy that's had 4 years of experience in college. He sat on the bench for a year or two in Miami. And you can go the other route with some other teams as well that fit in that description. To be quite frank, and especially with some of these guys that have been playing in these systems. So let's just say you're not going to have the same quarterbacks come out of the big schools like you traditionally would. I think, they're not going to start there. Let me say that. Because Cam Ward didn't start at Miami. Mendoza didn't start at Indiana. Joe Burrow didn't start at LSU. So you're going to see a bunch of guys that I think who are very intelligent about their build-up trying to get to the NFL. They might just go to a bigger program to learn behind some of the best offensive minds or pro-ready type offenses in college football. I could see, if one example is, I think there's a very calculated reason why Manning decided to stay at Texas. I think despite what he showed last year, I think he's going to make another step forward. And when he decides to come out of the draft because of the family, because of Sarkisian and how Texan runs the offense, that he's going to be the probably top 3, if not number 1 overall prospect. No matter how bad or good of a season, he's going to be there because of the name, and he's going to be there because he's deciding to sit. And that's very smart of him. Because let's just say coming out of the draft, if he would have came out this year, he probably would have been the second quarterback off the board. So
can I interject really quick, too? Another example of this is Oregon's Dante Moore, who was projected to be the second quarterback, pulled his name out of the draft to get another year of development and get a bag at Oregon. But that's important, like you're saying.
Yeah, it just goes to show that this is already happening, where we're seeing a guy that was projected to be a top 3 pick saying, no, I'm going to go back. Money's definitely the incentive, but I think he's got to have aspirations to play the NFL, especially if you're being projected to be a top 3 quarterback coming out, or a top 3 pick, just because of the landscape of the NFL and who's at the bottom to be in the top of the drafting order. But I think it's a very smart decision by Moore there. I think regardless how the season would go for him, this is more experience. He's going to be more successful in the NFL because of it. Now, what's going to be interesting, and this is just a point that I thought of, is that will we see potentially some more quarterbacks or maybe draft concerns about guys who have played longer or maybe have the medical history behind it? Obviously, this did not scare the Falcons drafting Michael Penix, but now we're sitting here 3 ACLs later and how long, what's going on there? 'Cause we really don't know. And it's going to be a very interesting time. I do think that, we're not going to be in this wasteland of quarterbacks. I just think we're in the middle of this turning the page. We're about ready to end a chapter and bring in a new one. And we're going to have a lot of new faces in the league in the next 3 years who, maybe maybe Josh Allen isn't and Lamar Jackson aren't going to win a Super Bowl. Maybe we're going to see this super team come up the next 2 to 3 years that we just did not see coming. Just because they have a guy that comes out and he's, looking like the new sheriff. We'll have to see. That's where it's kind of like we're on this teetering point because we don't know exactly what's going to change in college, not just in terms of players, but in terms of how the NIL, all these rules and conferences and games, how's that going to change? And then the NFL is there. We're all talking about right now, and other people have about the quarterback development. I'm sure it'll work out. It's just going to have to go a different route because the game is changing around us. And I think another point to show is with experience is that what's leading into this career resurgence with some guys that we left for dead, quite frankly. And, just to shoot off names just off the top of my head, I think Mac Jones could be one of those guys that gets paid this year. Baker Mayfield revived his career. Sam Darnold revived his career. Geno Smith had already revived his career. Daniel Jones revived his career after the Giants with just this stint with the Colts. He's still going to be a valued commodity despite his Achilles tear because he has shown that he's still capable of running an NFL offense at a high level. I know the Colts season didn't end like how they wanted, but damn, that first half of the season they looked unstoppable. Danny Dimes, Indiana Jones looked like he was going to be in the MVP conversation. Him and their running back they're just going on a tear. And I just want to, not that I want to pivot away from the conversation that we were just having, but I think what we're talking about in terms of the experience is being of high value is that you're seeing guys who maybe got left for dead making strategic moves to go to NFL franchises and coaching staff that are stable and are known for good development. And some of these players, you kind of see there's a path with how they got left for dead and they jumped to other teams. So I'll let you kick it off there just to let you in the door and go from there.
Yesterday we lost, I believe, NFL Hall of Famer Slingin' Sammy Baugh. He passed away. But in his place, NFL fans now have Slingin' Sammy Darnold, who is the best example of this and is the most high-profile example of what we're talking about. Baker Mayfield, too, Daniel Jones. But really, with the Super Bowl tomorrow, Sam Darnold is the perfect example of he's the perfect encapsulation of everything we've been talking about. All this conversation really hinged on Sam Darnold. Let me explain what I'm trying to say. Sam Darnold was drafted by the New York Jets, a football wasteland, terrible development. The Jets have not had a good quarterback since, Chad Pennington? I mean, Ryan Fitzpatrick
yeah,
was one of the better ones they've had, and he was a career journeyman. Obviously, we just said Chad Pennington. Mark Sanchez was never really a good quarterback, just in fairness. And, I'm struggling to even think of other guys that aren't like Joe Namath, who played in the 70s. So that just kind of shows you how bad the Jets are at developing quarterbacks. Sam Darnold, drafted number 3 overall from USC to the New York Jets. Sam Darnold was not a perfect quarterback prospect. There were some issues. He turned the ball over a lot. He could fumble it. He was kind of a little bit of a gunslinger, but he was a good quarterback. I always, not to be Captain Hindsight, but I will say, I always felt like Sam Darnold could be good. I always felt like it. And to me, it was really disappointing to see him go to the Jets. I remember, first reactions after that draft were, man, I hope he's good, but the Jets are tough. I always kind of held out hope for Sam Darnold being a pretty decent player. But anyway, he goes to the Jets, plays 3 seasons for them. Not very good. He has a few moments, but really he was a bust. I think he was considered a bust. He goes to Carolina after the Jets and is kind of a bridge starter. Hey, well, we need a quarterback next year. Let's pick up Sam Darnold. He's only 24 at that point in time, so he's a younger guy. He, 9 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, 2,500 yards, and 11 starts. The next year, he only starts 6 games. And, people are like, oh, Sam Darnold's never been to the Super Bowl before. Actually, he has. He was a backup on San Francisco's 2023 Super Bowl team that lost to the Chiefs. He was Brock Purdy's backup, funny enough. So after that stint, the Vikings take a flyer on Sam Darnold. Take a flyer on him because Kevin O'Connell is smart. Kevin O'Connell's a good coach. Minnesota, for the most part, is run pretty well. And they wanted Darnold to be the veteran quarterback for the young J.J. McCarthy, who needed some time behind a veteran quarterback to develop a little bit. Well, Sam Darnold goes out and balls out. At this point in time, he had been in the league for 6 years. He had transcended being a young, kind of plucky, mediocre to bad quarterback. He knew how to prep. He knew he had the arm talent. He was in his physical prime. He had bounced around. He understood the realities of the league. Minnesota was giving him an opportunity to start when maybe a lot of other teams wouldn't. And he took that chance, and he knocked it out of the park. 35 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 4,300 yards. He didn't play very well in the last couple games of the season, but you know what? He's still Sam Darnold. He's not, Tom Brady. He's not going to play perfect every week, but he revived his career in such an aggressive way. It was, hey, I am good. I am not a bust. I'm going to have a great season. This year, Seattle takes a flyer on him. People were still a little unsure. Is this a flash in the pan? Well, all he does is lead the Seattle Seahawks, who I believe were 10-7 and missed the playoffs last year, lead them to a Super Bowl. And now he's on the cusp of winning a Super Bowl after bouncing around the league as a journeyman, after being left for dead in his development process with the New York Jets. 25 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, 4,000 yards in the Super Bowl. I hope he wins. That would be a great, great, great story. Screw the Patriots. But he is the encapsulation of what we are talking about. Sam Darnold became a valuable quarterback because he wasn't super expensive, but he knew how to play quarterback in the NFL. He had traversed through some adversity, and he was a pro. And he still had the skills and the natural talent in his body from being, a high draft pick back in 2018. Other guys like Baker, we were talking about Baker Mayfield, Daniel Jones, Mac Jones, Geno Smith, not as much anymore, but a few years ago. All of these guys showed promise at one point in time. Mac Jones was a Pro Bowler for the horrible, post-Brady New England Patriots. I believe they made the playoffs and went 10-7. Now, it didn't quite work out, and he didn't get developed properly. He was bouncing around the league. He was with the Jaguars. He played with the 49ers this year, looked pretty good. Mac Jones, he could be a starting quarterback next offseason. And it's like this kind of situation. It's the Darnold blueprint, where could Mac Jones be the starter for the Miami Dolphins next year? Yeah, probably. Or there's plenty of other teams who maybe are kind of, hey, we just need a competent quarterback. Our defense is pretty good. We have some pieces. Take us to the next level. He could be that guy. I'm not saying he's going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the league, but I think Mac Jones has a floor. He's got a higher floor than a lot of these guys that are coming into the league. Maybe this year, not going to be as many. I think really Mendoza and maybe Ty Simpson are the only guys who are really going to be around the league. Maybe I'll be wrong, but Darnold, Geno Smith, Mac Jones, Baker Mayfield, another great example, goes to Tampa, left for dead, and at Cleveland, who destroyed him, took him to the playoffs and hurt him, essentially. Goes to Tampa, plays well. First half of this season, plays really well. Then he gets kind of banged up and tails off toward the end. The Bucs missed the playoffs. But Baker Mayfield, again, a good quarterback, a pro, knows how to play quarterback. Daniel Jones, again, before the Achilles injury, was playing the best football of his career. Super efficient. Daniel Jones is a very cerebral player, knows how to pick apart defenses if he's got the coach who's able to put him in this right position to make the throws that he actually can make, instead of going out there and playing hero ball the way the Giants were using him a little bit. I just think that experience and playing in the NFL, if you're talented enough, has become a valuable skill set because of the way these rosters are constructed and how these quarterback contracts are. And I'm going to actually, after I pass it off to you, I'll bring this point up later. I just think these guys have become assets for these teams, and you're really seeing this pay off now.
Yeah, you're going to keep seeing it because this happened in history too. You want to talk about Mark Bulger, you can go down the list and these guys, and this is just the guys from our era. And I'm not going to do a deep dive with every one of these guys, but I want to say, okay, what exactly happened for them to be left to dead? What led him away from this situation? I'll start with Mac Jones because he's the most recent one. So He got drafted. He played, 21. He was with New England from 2021 to the 2023 season. And in that time frame, you know how I talked about instability earlier, killing progression? Well, 21, Josh McDaniels OC. 22, Bill O'Brien OC. 23, Mike Judge and Matt Patricia, two motherfuckers that have never called an offensive play. It basically, they should not be touching it. They should not be. So this guy has had 3 different offensive coordinators in his first 3 years with New England. So he comes out his rookie year, he makes it to the Pro Bowl. Now I know that's a joke now, but then 21, I'm like, that's a pretty big deal for a rookie quarterback. Played 3,800 yards, 22 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. Looked great. 22 definitely the regression, and 23 just kept going down. And then we see him basically take a backup role with Jacksonville, and Lawrence goes down and he steps in, and I remember this, I know you remember this, but Brian Thomas Jr. went the hell off with Mac Jones, and everybody thought, oh, if he went off this year, he's going to be the guy next year, and BTJ just shriveled up in a shell. But he basically put on the clinic of like, okay, he did this in Jacksonville. He goes to San Francisco, goes to another good system. Intentionally, well, first off, Kyle Shanahan had originally wanted to draft him, but the Patriots took him. So there's a little backstory there. But Shanahan liked Mac Jones coming out of college. Really wanted him, but just was not in the position to draft him at the time. And he steps in for Brock Purdy when he's hurt, leads him to a 5-3 record. 13 touchdowns, 6 interceptions during that time frame. You're 100% right. He's going to get a look from somebody. And for a guy that was drafted in the first round, that you could put on the list of, let's say in the past 10 years, you could argue he's a top 3 Alabama quarterback coming out as well. You could make the argument. There's a reason why he was drafted that high. Part of that is because of the intangibles, and I think, hey, he's had all this time to cook and sit. There's no reason why I don't think he can come out and be, like you said, fill in for a team that's got some pieces and be like, hey, let's try to make a playoff run. I'm not saying he's winning the Super Bowl. I'm not saying that. But you're telling me he can't help a middling team fight for the playoffs? Absolutely. In terms of the Sam Darnold conversation there, not to add too much, but even in Carolina, his first year, he got the starting job. 4 weeks in, fractured his scapula, out for the season. Comes in next year, well, that's when Baker Mayfield gets brought in from Carolina. So he has to compete with Baker. He's got to compete with P.J. Walker. And can you imagine, interim head coach Steve Wilkes, out of those 3 guys, who does he name as the starter about halfway through the season? P.J. Walker. Great decision. That's why Steve Wilkes will never touch a head coaching job ever again. But, just the fact that I think going to San Francisco for him extremely helped. He was able to show it off in Minnesota. He had a little bit of a collapse at the end of the year, but guess what? You don't get the 14-3 just based off of, not just Sam Darnold, but you got those 14 wins, a good part of them, what he did. And then Baker Mayfield is the interesting case because I'd say out of everybody in this list, he showed the most validity at the start of his career. He won the first playoff game for the Browns in God knows how long. And you're right, he ran himself into the ground. He says, I'm going to keep playing. It was his non-throwing shoulder. He got hurt multiple times, and obviously his statistics have gone down from it. But, he got tired. And then Cleveland's just a dumpster fire, and they just offload him. The best quarterback that they've had, and name one in my lifetime that's been better than Baker Mayfield with Cleveland.
Literally can't.
And then, he goes to Carolina. He doesn't do too hot, but guess what? Carolina's also, at that time, a shitstorm, not looking great. But this is when, we all remember, he got traded to the Rams. In, less than 7 days prep. Fills in for Matthew Stafford when he's hurt. Game as a whole, not so great. It's just a slow game, but that last drive, you just saw Baker come to life, make just incredible throws, the fade route in the end zone. I believe it's the 2-2 Atwell. I might be wrong on that one. But just that was one drive revived this man's career. And he gets a 1-year prove-it deal from Tampa Bay, and he goes out and he balls out. And they're like, all right, we'll give you another deal, 3-4 years, $40 million, and he got the bag. And to be honest with you, Baker Mayfield is the only reason why the Buccaneers have been in the playoff hunt, in the playoffs the last 2 to 3 years. He's the only, and you saw when he got injured this year and his play kind of trailed off, same non-throwing shoulder, the whole team collapsed. The defense has been slowly falling apart. They haven't been able to replenish some of those guys that they had of their Super Bowl run. And a lot of the guys on the offense are getting older. And Todd Bowles still somehow has a job. There's some Bruce Arians magic working in the background. I have no idea. Geno Smith is probably the most... He's the one that came out of left field the most, hands down, because, once again, another player that gets drafted by the Jets in an overall weak class. I believe this was him in the E.J. Manuel class. This is a pretty shit class overall for quarterbacks. But he's the guy that put West Virginia kind of on the map in terms of recency. You know, it was him. It was... It's killing myself. Who was the wide receiver that they had that got drafted by the Cowboys that was just electric? Like, just small guy, gadget guy.
Are you thinking of... for
We've
some reason,
all seen the highlight reel.
No, I know. For some reason, Kevin White popped into my mind.
You were a Kevin White believer. That's why it's popping in your mind.
Yeah, I was a Kevin White believer. Tavon Austin.
Tavon Austin, yeah. So he was a part of
really
Pat
quick
McAfee.
on West Virginia, though, really quick. Pat White and Steve Slayton, 2008. Never forget. That West Virginia team was really good, but you continue.
But, yeah, dude, those West Virginia teams are awesome. Absolutely awesome. But he goes to the Jets. He doesn't really start out with a whole lot of success. First year, 3,000 yards, 12 touchdowns, 20 interceptions. This was not a good Jets team. They did go 8-8 that year, but the next year they went 3-10. He got hurt towards the end of the season, and basically stayed another couple years. The Jets never started. Giants, the Chargers, and then he sat basically on the bench for 2 years in Seattle. Got to come in 21, played a little bit, and didn't look too bad, you know. So they decided to roll with him. 5 touchdowns, 1 interception, 702 yards in that. I want to say it was a 3-game stretch right there, and then 22. It was like how many years late? 9 years later, after he was drafted, comes out, throws for 4,200 yards. He has 30 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, and this is his career year, right here. You know, 100.9 quarterback rating, the best year that he's ever had. And he's had solid years with Seattle up to that point. You could argue that his last year in Seattle, 24, you could definitely see the wheels are falling off. Well, this is a quarterback who's also 35, 36, 37 in that time. He's on the wrong end of 30. But even a guy like that, it's just lightning in a bottle moment. Just the fact he's obviously had some talent. He's hung in there because he's been on the bench for so many years for different teams, and he finally gets his opportunity. He's learned so much from the different coaching staff that he's been on. He was able to kind of sit in Seattle's system for a couple years before really getting to dive in, and he turned his career around. We will always think differently of, if you just cut Geno Smith, his career in half, 2019 after, before, he would be on one of those like bust lists that you would say, oh yeah, I remember Geno Smith. And he's become this guy that, at least in our generation, will always remember Geno Smith because he was one of the most improbable stories to come out of the NFL. And then Daniel Jones, man, that's just a weird situation where you watched a guy who I think is a good quarterback but needs the pieces around him, but the Giants were never that team to have all the pieces around him at one point. And he went on that one legendary season, made it to the playoffs, got a win, and that was basically the shut up or put up year, and that's when he got his contract. And then I don't want to say he bounced down back to earth, but that's just the Giants basically. I don't want to say they overreached, but they overperformed past their expectations that year. And all of a sudden, you're in the New York media market, and you got all these guys shouting you down. Oh, you paid him this much money, and he's not performing like this, and he's behind a dog shit offensive line, and the defense is not what it was even this past year. It's bad situation. Goes to the Colts, who you could make the argument that they are just a quarterback away from actually making a deep run. And they had it. They had it right in front of them, right in their lights in the car, and then it just the NFL gods are cruel, and they struck down the Colts, and now we don't know what's going to happen to the Colts for the next God knows how many years. I just pulled up these 5 players here, just in particular, because they've all been in bad situations and they've been able to rectify their careers. But we could go through, countless others throughout history on it, and I just think that with the NFL in terms of trends is almost like an ocean. It crashes on shore, comes back up. We're in the middle of this crash where I think you're going to see a lot of these older quarterbacks get another chance. Or they're going to have the opportunity where, like, hey, we're going to bring this journeyman in who was a very high-valued prospect coming out, and we're going to be on the bench and watch. Injuries happen in the NFL, and the guy steps in, and all of a sudden you got quarterback controversy. And I think we're just going to see more of that in the coming years.
Let me ask you something really quick, and then I'll get into my point. And they're not exactly correlated, but could Mac Jones beat out C.J. Stroud if the Texans signed him in a quarterback contract?
I wouldn't even hesitate
there we go.
with that one. I think that's one of those moves that the Texans, like, how bad do you want this thing right now?
Right, because their defense is incredible, and I strongly dislike the Houston Texans.
Yeah, that's one of those teams that if they had a, let's just say, average quarterback, I'd be terrified of them. I'm already terrified of them, but it was just like, man, if we catch, as long as C.J. Stroud doesn't have a good day, which is more often than not that he doesn't, we've always got a chance. But you imagine that team that's like, yeah, we can put up 24 points. I'm like, shit, they're winning 9 out of 10 games every time, no matter who they face. Mac Jones to the Texans, that would be an incredibly smart move.
So then to segue a little bit, and I'll give these guys credit. A couple of the Dude Perfect guys, I don't watch their podcast. I saw a clip of this. We're talking about this kind of take, and I'll throw this out there to you, and I'll give my take on it first. Is that our maximum, like max quarterback contracts or whatever, paying your quarterback $50, $60 million, however much a year, is that a bad thing? These guys take the money, it locks you into them for like 10 years, but we've kind of seen with the like the guys that seemingly are making the Super Bowl are these players that like are Sam Darnold on a small contract, or these rookies or younger guys who come to the league like a Joe Burrow who makes the Drake May, most recent example, on a rookie deal. Jaden Daniels taking his team to the NFC Championship game. They're on cheaper contracts. Are these contracts overrated? Do they take resources away from other parts of the team? This has always been a discussion because of the Tom Brady Patriots. Tom Brady purposefully took the greatest quarterback of all time, undisputed, purposefully took less money in his career to build out the roster and get other guys paid. And it really paid dividends for him. Now, people might say that's dumb. And look, this isn't, I want to make this very crystal clear too, and there are tiers above this. This isn't like a coal miner saying, I'm going to get paid less so, to help out the team or what, you know what I mean? Like the mining team. No, these guys are making multi-million dollars a year. Most of these quarterbacks are making like 10, 20, $30 million a year. This isn't, I get your bag, King, but also, if you take the bag, if you get the money, just know you're probably not going to be able to, have the team around you that you want. If you're Brock Purdy and you're living in San Francisco and your money doesn't stretch as far as, it would in Cincinnati or Florida or Texas or wherever, then yeah, take your contract. I have no problem with these guys getting paid this amount of money. I simply wonder from a strategic standpoint if it's smart to continue doing this if you're a team or if you're a quarterback, if you really want to be competitive every year, because that $10 million that you're taking on top of your contract, and maybe that's a good third receiver. Maybe that's another good corner or defensive back. Maybe that's another good rotational offensive lineman or defensive and interior defensive lineman. who could pressure the quarterback. And instead, because you're making this amount of money, those guys really aren't on the table. You have to settle for somebody who's lesser, or take a chance on maybe a rookie or an unproven player who is just kind of a dice roll. I tend to believe that Tom Brady, what he did was smart. I think I'm a little surprised why more guys don't do it, but I understand why they don't. I don't think that's bad or wrong or anything that they have chosen to make this amount of money. But from a team building perspective, it just makes a guy like a Sam Darnold that much more valuable. If you could pay him kind of a journeyman, even if he wins the Super Bowl, sign him to like a 3-year deal. You don't have to pay a guy for 10 years and lock yourself in, because where's the next value play after these quarterbacks get off their rookie deals? The most valuable quarterbacks, you could argue, are the rookies that come in and they are good right away. Drake May, Joe Burrow. Although, Jared Goff wasn't good his rookie year. Guess what? He made the Super Bowl his second year with Sean McVay. That's another example. Rookie contract. Those teams usually are pretty good. And I'll hand it off to you. What is your thoughts on that kind of situation?
I think if you're going to pay a guy that amount of money, this max contract type of stuff, you better have a lot of damn faith in how well you draft and how well you can pull trades off, whether that's Howie Roseman level or whatever it might be. But I do think there's going to be a guy, I don't know who, I have no idea, but there's going to be a guy in the next, let's say 5 years, that's going to be like, I'll take the pay cut. I'll take $30 million for, even though I know I'm a $50 million quarterback. It's going to happen. I don't, maybe, I don't want to throw names out, but, maybe if Mendoza works out, I could see him being that with his personality. Maybe a Bo Nix would do that. How bad does a guy want his bag versus how bad does he want to have a higher chance to have his name in history? And I think, but that's the other thing too. It's like people talk about, you can't get your money, da-da-da. I'm like, how much money do you think Tom Brady's making off that Pizza Hut commercial right now? Just guess.
Tom Brady's making all his money he's made all the money back on the back end from his $3 million pay cuts because he has 7 Super Bowl rings. Now, that doesn't mean your generic quarterback should do it, but I think it worked out pretty well for Tom.
Yeah, or there's just so many other ways that you can earn money that I'm not saying I'm mad at guys for not getting their money. They deserved it. I get it, 100%. But I do think you cripple yourself when you're paying a guy, let's just say like Dak Prescott, $60 million. I think Dak is a good quarterback. I don't think there's a single man alive in the NFL that deserves to be making $60 million. Patrick Mahomes, still. Josh Allen, no. I don't think any one of those guys should. I'm sitting here looking at, let me pull up. I have a, on the cap, over the cap pulled up right now. So just to look at, so in terms of base salary, it's not coming to effect particularly right now, but because of how they structured the deal. So Dak Prescott in 26 will be making a base salary of $40 million, and he'll have all those, the signing bonus, the guaranteed salary on top of it. But that cap number is $74 million, and that is 22.5% of the entire cap of the Cowboys. That is a fifth of your roster in one guy. I just don't see how any team could really put it all together, and that's why we all see, in terms of the rookie wage gap scale, you see so many teams that they're really trying to figure out these guys. They'll give these fifth-year options to figure out their guy. And I'll give you a hint. If you got to give a fifth-year option to your quarterback because you're still trying to figure it out, he's probably not the guy. But just to summarize, the point is, I don't think that you should be paying these quarterbacks 50, 55, or like, let's just say, I'm going to pull up Trevor Lawrence here because he was one contract that when I heard it, I was like sick to my stomach hearing it, where, now don't get me wrong, it's kind of like it's structured towards the back end, and they'll probably restructure it, and that's the thing, you can always move around your money. They're going to restructure Mahomes' deal this year to bring up some cap, but he's going to make $78.5 million in 29. Trevor Lawrence is. So I think if you can find a way to fudge the numbers or restructure the cap, as I call it, because I don't exactly understand how some of these guys get paid. I don't know if it's just like we're just going to give you a straight up signing bonus this year and reduce the salary cap this year. I don't know exactly how they make everything work. That's something I want to look into more. But I wouldn't pay. There's going to be a team. Not only that I said there's going to be a guy that takes a pay cut, but there's going to be a team that just says no. Like, we don't think you're worth that much. Go to the market. Let somebody else pay for you. We think we can have a guy in the draft that can do just as good, if not better than you. Or we're going to get another veteran out there, sign him for $30 million instead of giving you $55 million. It's going to happen. Because I'm also a proponent of, hey, the more good players that you have on your team, the higher chances that you're going to go further in the league. You can't just put it all on 3 guys. Bengals. But, yeah, you got to have – because any type of weakness that you have, why did the Rams lose? Arguably their special teams unit being one of the worst in the league. And it came back to bite them in the ass at the worst possible time in the playoffs. You got to have talent at every piece of the roster. And that's why you're looking at a team like Seattle. It's like, well, they gave up a 3rd or a 4th round pick for Rashid Shaheed. And guess what? He's been one of the most electric guys in the playoffs, just in terms of the special teams. And that is a benefit that, you know, maybe the Seahawks don't make it to the Super Bowl without making that trade, without being aggressive, because they had the cap space to do it, because they have the 2nd most cap in the league. And guess what? They gave Sam Darnold kind of here's a 3-year, I can pull it up here, but he's not making more than $40 million. And they have all of this talent on their defense, and they have guys that they are going to have to pay. But guess what? They got money in the bank to do it. They can keep the core together because they have a cheap contract like Sam Darnold in there, and they're like, hey, as long as we protect him and we get the weapons around him, he's going to do everything we ask him to do. And the defense is young, and we're going to have him on the roster for a few more years before we pay him. They're set. The Seahawks are not going away because they manage their money correctly. And this is where if the dude perfect, if they're agreeing to say, hey, paying quarterbacks that amount of money is overrated, I agree 100%. Because let's just say I want to look at the number of Super Bowls that Kansas City has won before and after they paid Patrick Mahomes. How good was the roster for the Bills before and after they paid Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson?
The Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah. You can sit there, and I'm not saying Joe doesn't deserve that money. Joe, you can make the argument, does deserve that money, but guess what? He's hurt half the time. Your defense is falling apart. You're trusting your front office, and this is where I say, hey, if you're going to pay your guys, you better make sure you do well in the draft department. Well, guess what? Your number 1 overall pick has the same amount of tackles as your starting wide receiver, Jamar Chase, and only has 1 sack of the year. That's a terrible pick. How do you screw that up that bad? You know, you're getting paid millions of dollars as well to do your job, and your job for the main point is it all comes down to 1 night. I should say 3 nights on a weekend in April. And if you can't do your job right and you can't do it consistently, why are you still in the office? And this is not just a Bengals rant. This is so many other teams that are out there rant. Like, if you're just consistently making mistakes. And you can't look at other teams and say, well, they did this, they did that. I'm like, look at the players around you. Who did you pick? Why did you pick them? Why is the player that you missed on so much better? I feel like these teams, these front office, don't learn from their mistakes. You know, and you see a guy, well, hey, Howie Roseman is not perfect, but he's pretty damn good, and he's learned from his mistakes because, hey, remember, he was the GM, and then they forced him to step down, and he came back up. That dude, guess what? Just like our player, sat on the bench for a little bit, reworked his mind, rethought about the strategy, comes back in, and you can make the argument that Roseman is a top 3, if not maybe number 1 GM in the league because they stuck with him. They knew that the talent that he had, and it also gave him a kind of a brain reset. Obviously, the GM job is differently from being an NFL quarterback or any of these other players that have another opportunity in their career. But it just, don't pay the quarterback. If you don't think he's worth it, don't pay it. And you better figure out the rest of the way, because if you pay the quarterback and all falls apart, it all falls back on you. It's not going to fall back on the quarterback unless you got like a Tua situation where you wondering how many brain cells he's got left.
I think the headline, if we had to like spell it out in neon lights, it's not that the quarterback position is overrated because it's the most important position in all professional sports. It's that the max contract franchise quarterback is overrated. And that's really, I think, what we're both articulating here is that once you pay these guys that amount of money and it's committed to them, that there's not enough money to pay other guys. I mean, it's a tale as old as time, and we just kind of went through it. But there's something that happens when you commit that much money to a player like that, and it's not that they don't deserve it, but that's the catch-22 of this whole thing. It's that these guys are so great, and they command that kind of money, and then they get paid, and that's the, I guess, the deal with the devil in a way. You know, you're like, I get paid, but my team may not be as good, and we can't afford to pay other players that amount of money, or we're running up our cap really high because so many guys on the roster command these like max level deals, or you're like the Bengals, 3 guys are making a lot of the cap. It just doesn't work, and you literally. It takes all the room for error away. You have to be perfect. You have to hit on every draft pick. The guys you sign in free agency have to be good. You have to keep your best, most important positional groups intact. It doesn't all the time work, and it forces the GM to be perfect when in reality it's just not sustainable generally.
Yeah.
And I think go for it.
No, I was just going to say, it's not an easy job to make all those draft picks hit, and it's not going to happen. But that's why I think you got to be aggressive like the Seahawks do and make your trade, or you got to be aggressive like the Philadelphia Eagles are if you really like a guy. Or you need to, like, you got monopoly money, you're trading guys left and right, cutting guys. You got to stay active if you're paying your quarterback. You got to figure out a way. And just to put in perspective, is that, let's just say, I mentioned Dak's contract right now. This year was, 20% of the salary cap? Comparing this to Trevor Lawrence, who is the number 1 overall pick, only has a 5.7% cap. And I think we can all argue that top to bottom, Jacksonville has a much better team, much better roster than the Dallas Cowboys do. Because guess what? They have all that money to spread around and build up that defense again and pay for this offensive line, where the Jacksonville Jaguars are most likely better in every single category. I could make the argument for the passing, is that's where Dallas hasn't beat. But guess what? Same thing with the Bengals, is that you have put all your money on one side. You better hope that one side works out, because if it gets slowed down or it gets shut down, your whole team's done.
I think with the Bengals, and this is, we've already seen the perfect like encapsulation of what the team could be with this kind of salary structure. It's not the last year's Bengals, but the Bengals team before, like the 24 Bengals, where they barely missed playoffs and went 9-8, and their offense was insane, and they were putting up a bunch of points, and their defense was horrible, and that's the apex Bengals you probably have with this type of roster construction. It just is. So I'm interested to see if some of these quarterback contracts could be restructured in a way to spread some more money around. I think teams are going to get smart to this because, like we've been saying, you need a deeper roster to win games. You either have to have hit on your young quarterback and get a ringer like Drake May, and you make the Super Bowl, and that's your window, or you find a guy, toward who's a little cheaper, who's a veteran quarterback. He'll be able to take you to the Super Bowl. Not all, guys like Brad Johnson and Trent Dilfer have won the Super Bowls. I'm not saying you should strive to have those guys at quarterback, but the blueprint is there. You don't have to pay a certain dude buku money to win in the NFL. There's various ways to win football games and construct your roster. And yes, you do need a good quarterback. You can't have a crap shit quarterback. You just can't. But you don't need a quarterback necessarily making $55 million a year. And that's kind of kind of where I've landed as a fan and maybe as just a podcaster. That's yeah, I think that's my take on it, really.
Yeah, I think we're both in agreement on there is that it helps to have the quarterback, but there gets to a point where the money just teeters the roster too much. You got to have this balance. And a lot of these teams, I'd say it'd probably be 30 out of 32 teams would be scared to turn that guy away. I think only a handful of teams could actually pull that off and their fan base does not implode. Can you imagine, though, like if you had Josh Allen and you're like, we're not going to pay you, we're going to let you walk. You think the Bills fans wouldn't go down there and burn the stadium down?
Well, they would.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like it's easier for us to say that, but there's a lot more pressure on that. But it'll happen. One of these teams will do it, and it won't be Josh Allen's the easy and obvious one, but it'll be like, what do you want to do with Bryce Young? That's going to be a questionable one. You going to let him walk?
Let him
You going
walk.
to extend him? What are you going to do? Because I'm not a Bryce believer. I think he's shown spurts of it, but I'm like, what do you think he demands at the table?
It's like Kyler Murray is. You know what I mean? Like that's a good example of this. He's not very good. Point blank. Period. Where's my money? Well, guess what, bro? We're not paying you. No, you suck. Like, what are we talking? You play Call of Duty all day. Like, you want to be one of these mid-career resurgence guys? Go for it. You can do that. It's not like he can't play in the NFL at all. He's not, but he's not that kind of quarterback. But because of the Arizona situation or whatever, they were forced to pay him to keep him in the building and have some level, some floor. I get all of that. But it didn't work out. Bryce Young is another good example. You bring that up. We've talked about C.J. Stroud. You could argue, and this is a real argument, and I don't want to get on a Jalen Hurts conversation, but you could make an argument with having a guy like Howie Roseman that if you don't pay Jalen Hurts all that money, and yes, they did win a Super Bowl, so it's a little bit of a moot point, but could you have a Baker Mayfield on the Eagles and they're probably just about the same, or like a Sam Darnold or, somebody like that. You could make that argument, certainly. I would hear that out. And I do think Jalen is good, and he probably gets maligned a little too much, even if there are maybe some holes in the way he understands the game. He is a winning quarterback. He is a winning player. He is a good player. I just think that he hasn't separated himself enough to warrant that kind of contract, even if he's already won a Super Bowl, which sounds crazy to say. So who am I to question that, I guess? But he makes $51 million a year, and I don't feel like he's one of the 10 best quarterbacks in the league.
Yeah, I do want to make a side note here. We collectively has been shitting on C.J. Stroud a lot for his recent playoff performance. Totally deserved. I wouldn't say I'm just out of C.J. Stroud because we just talked about all this developmental time, and it would sound very hypocritical if we were just like, cut him, get rid of him. And I'm not saying he's cooked, but maybe, bringing in Mac Jones might be a little bit of a reset. Hey, they sat Bryce Young for a little bit, let Andy Dalton take over, and you can make the argument Bryce Young's played a little bit better. It's C.J. Stroud. I liked what I saw at Ohio State, and obviously he showed what he had in his rookie year. I do think that offensive line has been stripped for talent, and I don't know why. The Texans kind of did the opposite of what I would think you would do in terms of building around a franchise quarterback. But I will say I'm not out on Stroud. I think you still have your time in your window, but I would definitely bring in a veteran presence into that locker room to either be like, I'm going to sit you straight, or you're going to have to work to get this starting job. Just have a backup plan. That's what I'm basically telling Houston to do. I'm like, don't be out on him, but hey, you got your window right now. You better get a guy that can if he can't. Otherwise, you're once again sitting in a river. You're in a boat with no paddles. So I want to clarify that. I'm not out on Stroud, but I do think the Texans need a little bit more help in that quarterback room.
I would agree with that. I'm probably a little more on the negative side of that equation than you might be. And then, yes, I don't want to be hypocritical either. Like, I don't think, like, the Mac Jones thing was simply a thought exercise. I think, obviously, Houston is going to roll with C.J. Stroud next year. He's a quarterback that is proven to be good enough to take your team to the playoffs. I think, and just stating the obvious here, but the main issue with CJ is the perceived regression of his overall state of play the past couple of years. It has not been very good. He seemingly regressed every year since his rookie year, and I thought his rookie year was, quite frankly, a little overrated. To tell you the truth, I think he was very efficient. I think he was a good player. I think he had a great rookie year stats on paper, but let's just say I just thought it was overrated. And now I do think CJ is a good quarterback. I think he played in the NFL a long time. He's not trash. He's not a bum. He did play like a bum in the playoffs and has shown that repeatedly. But I just think the conversation hinges on the amount of money that he could command simply due to the state of his contractual progression. It's like year 4, year 5. It's like, do we really want to pay CJ Stroud like $50 million a year? No way. No way. It cannot happen. That would be a death knell for Houston, who has constructed a great roster. He is the weakest link on the roster. Yes, they need a better running back, but their offensive line, and that's all true. But I just think, I'll say this too: if CJ was making like $30 million, I would take that all day long. It's that like $50 million or whatever number, that high number, the max contract number, that would terrify me. If he made like slightly above average quarterback money or whatever, I would be pretty okay with that. I think they'd be able to work with that as a front office. But, Bryce, I know that they made the playoffs and he did improve. I just worry how much upside is there. I worry I think Bryce could be a little bit better than he was this year, but I just don't really seeing it get like much higher than that. Like, I don't know if I see Bryce Young passing for like 4,000 yards or whatever.
I just want to know the number that his agent would come out with. I think that would be the biggest deciding factor, because if he's like, I want $50 million, I'd be like, get the fuck out. Like, you are not a $50 million quarterback. But how bad is Carolina feeling? Like, what's the pressure? And I'm in the area, but I wouldn't say I'm around a lot of hardcore Panthers fans or anything like that. Now, there's definitely some Bryce Young truthers, but I'm like, I need to ask one of them when I run into them. Just be like, hey, what's your opinion?
Yeah.
What would you pay them? And I'll have to get back to you on that one. This is not that I want to get off the quarterback conversation, but I want to throw this out there. I want you, and we'll each do it, I can lead off if you want, but I want you to give your Super Bowl prediction with final score.
Okay. Did you say you're leading off or me?
I'll lead off.
Okay.
I do think Seattle wins the game. I think this is going to be a grudge match where we're going to see which team can perform the least amount of mistakes. With that being said, I think the final score is going to be 16-13 Seattle. I think it's going to be a field goal game, and each team is going to get a touchdown when they really need it. But I think it's going to be a fight in the trenches. It's going to be fun to watch. And we're going to see both quarterbacks get battered.
I'm going Seattle 20-17 or 21-7. Let's land on 21-17. There may be like I agree with your analysis pretty much. I think it's going to be a defensive type game. I do think maybe we could. I don't think there's going to be like no offense production. I could see a couple touchdowns, but I don't think it's going to be any high scoring affair. I believe Seattle is the better team. I think I do buy into the scheduling critique. Not that the Patriots set their schedule, but simply that they played They've knocked all the tomato cans down that were in front of them, but they were still tomato cans. And I think Seattle is more battle tested, and they are a better overall team. And if they can minimize mistakes, a la Sam Darnold not turning the ball over, they have a real chance to finish 15-3 or 16, 17-3. I can't remember, but I'm going Seattle here. I like the Seahawks. It would be, we've spent the past couple weeks on here talking about the Sam Darnold redemption. If the NFL gods are real, that's what they're giving us. They're not giving us Robert Kraft gets another Super Bowl and Boston fans are happy. Nobody wants that. I know the narrative doesn't always align, but it would feel icky if New England won this Super Bowl. And again, it doesn't have anything to do with Drake May or really anybody on New England or the coaching, from my perspective, the coaching staff, Vrabel, none of that. It is, I do not want Boston fans, New England fans, Robert Kraft, get the Josh McDaniels, get the F out. I don't want to see this again. And Seattle winning would just be a much better story, and it would make more sense because they're a better team.
So how does it feel to be the biggest hater of New England sports in the media space?
Oh, me? There's no way it's me. But I actually don't hate. This is crazy, and I may have said this on the previous pod. I can't remember, or one of the previous pods. But I don't hate the Boston Red Sox. I don't hate the Boston Celtics. I don't really know a lot about hockey, so I can't comment on the Bruins. But I do hate the Patriots. So it's not like I'm shaking my fist at Peyton Pritchard or Jason Tatum. I'm not a big Jaylen Brown guy, honestly. And then with the Red Sox, I mean, they got 4 World Series in the 21st century, but they're not always good every year. It doesn't feel like it's just impending doom. But the Patriots, always go back to the Patriots because their fans just come out of nowhere, okay? There's guys with Tom Brady jerseys in their closet that haven't looked at them for the past 5-6 years, and they dust it off, and they're like, I'm a Patriots guy. And it's like, my brother, you live in Colorado. What are you talking about? My brother, you live in Ohio. You're not a Patriot. What are you talking about? I hate that. I hate it. And the Boston people who love the Patriots are even more annoying online. Besides all the bandwagon people, you have all these guys who just front run. Like Bill Simmons was sitting here trying to drive the Drake May for MVP bandwagon on his podcast the past couple of weeks. And I love Bill Simmons, so I'm just throwing that out there. I just critiquing him in this way. He's driving the bandwagon. It's like making the argument that he should be the MVP over Matt Stafford. And even if they win the Super Bowl, I still think Matt Stafford deserved the MVP more. Drake May has not played very well in the playoffs. I like Drake May. I think Drake May is great. This is no shade at him. It is the people that push these narratives. Dave Portnoy. Okay, that's the perfect one. Dave Portnoy. All of these guys, it's like, zip it, dude. You're annoying. You don't need any more good stuff in your sports fandom. I'm sick. You have used so much devil magic. There's no way there's any left, right? This just cannot happen again. So, yeah, I feel pretty good about it, hating the Patriots. I'll never change my ways. The Patriots could... The only way I'd like the Patriots is if they... healed a bunch of people from cancer, or something like that. That's the only way.
I had a Tom Brady jersey growing up, and I don't regret that at all because if
I don't hate Tom Brady anymore.
Yeah, okay, yeah, it took you a while. It only took you
it did take
20-some years. But so I'm going to ask you this question then. So if the Patriots were to win, because you've mentioned this multiple times. Is this a category of a Mickey Mouse Super Bowl because of their schedule? And what's your thoughts on that? Because other people's going to say that. They got the easiest schedule. The AFC didn't have Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen collapsed and blah, 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 and all this stuff. It's so what's your take on that?
Get your mouse ears out, folks. I'm here to discredit any potential New England Super Bowl. And congratulations preemptively if they win. And again, this
Put that out in the universe.
I don't want that. Yeah. It's out there. It's out. There's people saying this, but yeah, it's Mickey Mouse. What are we talking about, dude? They beat absolutely nobody all year. Their best win is like that one game against the Bills. It's like, stop it, fellas. Like, stop it. The Rams were the best team, and the Seahawks. The NFC Championship was the real Super Bowl in my opinion. And honestly, just to keep it 100, if Bo Nix doesn't get hurt, Denver wins that game. I just think Denver is better than New England this year. I think New England was one of the 5 best teams. They probably outperformed what I thought they were going to do this year, but I did think New England was going to be a playoff team. I did not expect them to go 14-3.
Nobody.
I don't know. Yeah, it's Mickey Mouse Super Bowl. Let's just keep it a buck here.
Well, first off, not that I want to come to their defense. This New England defense is fantastic, and we have seen Drake May pull off some phenomenal throws this year. And I'll tell you what, if it's not the defense that wins it for New England, it'd be Drake May. And then you got to worry about another monster in the AFC, which is terrifying.
If Drake May played on, I don't know, the Cleveland Browns or the Minnesota Vikings or the Miami Dolphins, I would have. And I like Drake May. I just wouldn't, it's just the fact he plays for the New England Patriots. And it all goes down to like Bob Kraft. And
dude, I'm just like soft serving you, like underhand tossing you some New England hate. And
I hate them.
Dinging them out of the park right now. This is awesome.
I'll pimp it out like Barry Bonds, dude. They just do not deserve any more Super Bowls. I don't want to hear a single thing from Dave Portnoy in the media about how they're so great and how he earned this. Like he'll go around saying like he earned this. It's like at what point does this stop? Are we really gonna have to sit here and watch New England be good again for the next 10 years? And just unequivocally be the best franchise in NFL history? I say no. So let's all get behind Seattle. Let's all get behind Sam Darnold. Let's root for the Seahawks. And hopefully the Patriots never make it back to another Super Bowl again, at least for the next 10 years. So, Drake, you got your one. Look, Drake, I'm a fan of you personally, not your team, but I'm a fan. This is your one chance, buddy. This is your one chance. All right, you're never coming back to this game.
That's bold.
I'll be praying up. It's like, man, come on, the Dolphins. Let's get another quarterback in there, or Josh Allen, new stadium. Let's go Bills. Like, just keep these guys away from the inner ring of the NFL. I'm sick of it.
What would you do if this was the start of a potential another New England dynasty? How much would this hurt you as a Colts fan?
Well, in fairness to them, I mean, it would hurt me, but in fairness to New England, we really haven't been rivals since Manning Brady, but it would bum me out. There's so many other teams I'd rather see.
But dude, that rivalry is embedded in your brain.
It
You
is.
will always hate them.
Here's what I'll say about this. I got bored. I'll say this. I got bored of the Chiefs winning, and honestly, by the end of that, like last year, I was like, I'm over this, man. Like, I'm totally over this. The Taylor Swift stuff, I just don't care anymore. The goodwill has ran out. However, I do not hate those Chiefs teams even one iota. Not even close. Not even close to the amount of just vitriol I have toward the New England Patriots. It's not even comparable. I got bored of the Chiefs. I got frustrated with the Chiefs. I despise the Patriots. So, as a Colts fan, I can't say I'd love it. It just make it harder for us to make it back to being above average again, I guess. I'm more worried about Tennessee getting good or Houston actually figuring out their quarterback situation or C.J. Stroud improving or Jacksonville, not becoming like a real threat rather than New England. But it just stacks the deck against the Colts, I guess.
All right, I got one more question for you, and this isn't really related to the Super Bowl, but this is just me kind of stoking the flames a little bit more. What is the most infuriating moment that you have seen with your Colts franchise, like game wise, not decision making, but like what was a moment that you're watching a game and you thought like, hey, well, not that you would because you're not that type of guy, but this would be a really good time to punch a hole in a wall or just lose your damn mind. Do you have a moment like that?
You know what? Actually, the first I got to think about this, but the first thing that comes to my mind is the 45-7. I think it's 2014 AFC Championship game where Andrew Luck and the Colts lost to the Patriots. But what I will say about that is, as far as like the context of your question, is that game was so over. Like, it was so over that I wasn't just like so mad, I could like rage out, because it was just demoralizing. They got just punked. They got absolutely cooked. Let me see here. The most mad the Colts have ever, like the most mad moment of the Colts, I would probably say, you know what? Probably, and this is an obvious answer, but genuinely, when Peyton Manning threw the pick six to Tracy Porter against the Saints in the Super Bowl, that was really, really demoralizing, because I felt like we were, on the cusp of coming back and winning that game, and that just ruined everything. Now, I don't rage over the Colts losing that Super Bowl. I'm so happy for Drew Brees and the Saints that they have won and all of that. So I don't really. Do I wish we would have won? Absolutely. Am I super pissed about it? In hindsight, no. But in that moment, as a Colts fan, I was definitely extremely upset at that interception being taken back for a touchdown. Dude, I'm trying to think of another one.
While you're thinking, I'm gonna lay off mine. This one's probably gonna be fairly obvious, but it was the 21-22 season where my Titans lost to the Bengals after having the number 1 seed in the divisional round, and that was an absolutely brutal game, especially with how much pressure we were getting on Joe Burrow and the amount of sacks that we had on him, and we still lost. Watching Ryan Tannehill and the wheels fall off. What made it especially brutal, not just the game, but in the moment I was in, I made a very unwise decision to go into Cincinnati, and I was at one of my classmates from grad school. I was in their apartment. It was probably about 10 of us, and it was me, Kaylee, and all of them. And I'm the only Titans fan in that apartment. And I'm having to fend off the horde. I'm also talking mass shit back as the game is going on. And then, of course, Titans lose it. And this is on Vine Street, by the way. So when the game is over, they got their window open. People are running out in the streets. They won the playoff game. And I'm wearing my Titans jersey. And I have to, compose myself in front of all of them because, this internal rage is just... I'm sitting here, I'm like, I got to get out of here. So I might have stayed there for 5 more minutes. I'm like, I'm going home. And I'm walking through. It's the most pitiful thing. I'm walking through Vine Street. My head's down. I'm like doing this little sad shuffle back to my car. And all these people are running around. They're, F the Titans, blah, blah. And I'm sitting there. I just get to the car. And then I just sit there for a second. And Kaylee's like, are you okay? And that's when I was like, punched the steering wheel a few times. And I'm like, no. And I just drove home in silence the rest of the night. I hated it, especially to the Bengals. When people ask me, oh, why do you hate on the Bengals? I'm like, well, there's one particular moment right there. But, it's one of those things I kind of mentioned, like, oh, I hate the Colts. It's not because, historically the Titans and the Colts have never had, this. You're like, oh, they're coming at each other almost every year. It was basically, 1 year, I'd say for consecutive years, the Colts are beating the shit out of the Titans, and then we go on this little run where now it's the opposite end, where it's like, oh, Andrew Luck's gone, and now the Colts are the joke in the division, and this is I would say a friendly rivalry where it's like, I don't want the Colts to win, but if we do, yeah. But definitely the Bengals playoff game was soul crushing, because for me in that moment I knew it's over. The team's getting blown up. We had our window these past 2 years. You lost to the Chiefs in the AFC Championship the year before, and we blow the number 1 seed, and I was like, yep, it's done. It's all blown up, and I was right. Give it 1 to 2 seasons later, it's all gone, and we've been trying to rebuild ever since.
The other moment I would highlight would be the Steelers game. I think it was like 2004, 2005, when Ben Roethlisberger saved a touchdown on like a fumble recovery that would have been an easy run back, and he tripped. I can't even remember. It was so long ago, but I do remember watching this when I was a kid. Maybe 2005 or 6, one of those years. That was another one. As far as the Bengals-Titans thing, I remember I was at Buffalo Wild Wings in Lexington with a couple of my friends from college, and I loved it. And it wasn't even an anti-Titans thing, actually, for me. Although maybe it was a little bit, because I was with a couple of my friends who were from that area that liked Tennessee, so that was a little fun. But it was nice to see the Bengals, win that game. I never felt like that Titans team was good, but didn't have like a lot of juice. So it wasn't like a giant was being toppled or something.
They were fraudulent. Like the year before when they went into the AFC Championship, that was the year where I was like, oh my God, they can actually do it. They've already beat the Chiefs.
See, I forgot about
that. Yeah, they had a phenomenal roster, and then it was just like you slowly watch the pieces fall away. And I knew coming into that season, I'm like, I still think we'll be good. We'll make the playoffs probably, but I don't know how it's going to turn out. And then we somehow get the number 1 seed, and everybody's like, how did the Titans get the 1 seed? They're the most fraudulent. I'm like, stop talking about my team. I already know they're fraudulent. Quit it. We don't need to say it out loud. And then they just proved it right. So
I totally forgot they made the AFC Championship game that year. Wow.
And that was this in the past 5 years too. And people were like, when have the Titans done anything? I'm like, excuse me? I'm like, we've been close a couple times. But yeah, we're back
right on the cusp.
Yep.
I'm looking at it here. 11-5, 12-5. 2 pretty good teams. 7-10, 6-11, 3-14, 3-14. And then they had those couple years like I'm looking at that Mike Mularkey. Oh my God, dude.
Dude, I don't want to talk. I'd say if you want to talk about other mad moments, it's the amount of times I've seen us hire a head coach and instantly know like why the hell did we do that? And then he's gone 2 years later.
Mike
I'm like,
Munchak.
I could have told you that. Yeah. All of these guys. Why? I don't want to. I've done that before. I've went down the list of our coaches' history, and I'm like, this is complete. Like, I kid you not, Mike Vrabel was the best coach we've had in the past 25 years. Like, without a doubt. Without a doubt. And this is the fact that Robert Saleh actually has me excited should tell you. And don't be wrong, I'm genuinely excited, but I'm like, this dude is probably going to be potentially the second best coach we've had since Mike Vrabel. I'm like, hope to God he's not Jeff Fisher, good old 8-8 Jeff Fisher.
We can close on this because I'm interested to get your opinion on this. So, over the next 2 years, there's going to be 2 stadiums opened in the NFL. Okay, next year is the new Highmark Stadium for the Buffalo Bills, which opens, I believe, in Orchard Park, New York. And then in 2027, I say next year, like this upcoming season for the Bills. And then in 2027, the new Nissan Stadium is set to be completed in Nashville, Tennessee. And maybe you're biased, but which one of these are you more interested in seeing? Because they're each a little different. Which one are you more excited for?
I'll be honest with you. I genuinely, let me pull up a picture of, I haven't looked at the concept for the Bills Stadium. So that is my bad for being unprepared there. First off, I will say the fact that, you're playing in Buffalo and you decide to have, are they doing a dome? Is that correct? No, good.
No, outdoor.
Good. I was about ready to have a rant because I also have disdain for teams that have cold weather environments that decide to put a dome on. I'm like, isn't this an advantage for you?
Shout out to the Green Bay Packers, by the way.
So I obviously know what our stadium's going to look like. Our stadium's kind of interesting. I have to see actual pictures of it before, like, here's just the concept art. The stupid ad. Before you go ahead and lead off while I'm waiting for this stuff to load.
I'm pretty high on both of them personally. I'm giving the edge to Buffalo, and this has nothing to do with the Titans. I'm giving the edge a little bit to Buffalo because I think it's really cool. They have an outdoor stadium, but it's like a new concept. You really don't see that because the Vikings built an indoor dome stadium, or not dome stadium. They just built an indoor stadium. Detroit, Ford Field, indoor. Now, historically, in fairness, Minnesota and Detroit have played indoors pretty much our entire life. Our entire life before that too. They're not really cold weather teams. I mean, I think you'd have to go back to like Fran Tarkenton for the Vikings. But I would have been very upset, like you were saying, if Buffalo would have built an indoor stadium. I just think that is completely against what a Buffalo football team should. Like Western New York, hard scrabble, blue collar, Rust Belt. They need an outdoor stadium. Their team is tough. Don't take away snow environments from us just so you can host the Super Bowl one time. It's not worth it. They're going to play in Atlanta. They're going to play in Miami. They're going to play at SoFi in LA. They're going to play in Glendale, Arizona. Nobody's going to Buffalo to watch the Super Bowl. They know that. So let's have something for the community. Let's keep a little bit of the cultural integrity around the snow games. And to go to the Titan Stadium,
not to interrupt, but I would sit here and say, like, so far, like, I feel like the Bills Stadium, it truly feels like this is a football stadium. And the new Nissan Stadium is going to be like an all-in-one. It's like, dude, so many concerts going to be built here. It's Tennessee is kind of like, it's almost like a futuristic look, almost. Like, it kind of looks like a giant, at least from the outside, like, it's a party going on around the event kind of deal.
It looks like a record player, the actual building.
Yeah. I mean, it looks really cool the way it's kind of like set up within the city of Nashville. And it seems like, I'm looking at some of these seats now. These are pretty dope for some of the suites, but it's just, I think from what it looks like, just in terms of like they have all these open like mezzanine areas where you're on top in the second level of the stadium. You're hanging outside. You're not even technically like in the stadium. It looks like this is a huge project for the city of Nashville to be an all entertainment, not just football. It's home of the Titans, but they're going to have so many more options of it. And then Buffalo, I like the exterior part of the Buffalo here with their stadium with kind of the glass that they have set up here. That looks really cool. That's tough. I think I would be more excited about going to see the new Nissan Stadium, to be honest. It just in terms of like, this is different. This looks really cool. I feel like this is probably going to capture, I think they both will, but I feel like Tennessee's is like, this is the vibe of Nashville. Like I like it. They did a really good job with it.
I think that current Nissan Stadium doesn't really have a lot of personality. It's not like the old Bill Stadium, which, yes, was out of date, but it felt very beloved by the community. There's a lot of nostalgia for the Bill Stadium. And the Titan Stadium was built, I think, in 1998 or something like that. There wasn't a lot of great moments there. There wasn't a lot of, I've been there personally. It's very generic. I'm not throwing shade. I just think it objectively is.
No, you're right.
And I think the new stadium is going to be, like you're saying, an all-purpose venue where they're going to host events, probably like the college football playoff or an NCAA Final Four, because Nashville is an event hosting city with, it's the capital of country music. It's an entertainment capital. Now it's going to be a sports capital with, the Titans' new stadium. So I'm just, as a football fan, I'm a little more excited about the Bill Stadium, but I do think the Titan Stadium is cool, and I haven't been to Nashville in a few years. When I was in college, I used to go down there all the time. So I'm pretty familiar with Nashville. And I think the new stadium district they're going to build down there around the new stadium is going to be really cool. And that's going to be a big party place. Nashville's already a good football town. So you can add this to the list. That's going to aid in that experience.
We still need to, we've talked about it in the past, just too much stuff going on in life, but we need to plan some trips, get to the new Nissan Stadium, and I still haven't been to Lucas Oil.
I got a trip for you after we hop off. I'll let you know, because I actually was talking about this. One of my other buddies let me know. But do we anything else? Oh, no. Actually, I want to add this really quick. So I live very close to Paycor Stadium. I can see it from my apartment. It's right there. I like Paycor Stadium, but it's not that great. Like it's kind of like it's very generic. Obviously, there's been people talking about like, well, should they move out to like Mason, Ohio, or somewhere in northern Kentucky, like the Bengals franchise? I really like that it's on the riverfront. I actually think it's the perfect place for that venue, but I don't think it's financially feasible, like, to build another multi-billion-dollar stadium on the riverfront, and the city or the county is Hamilton County, city of Cincinnati, is not going to give them the money to do that. What I hope, because this crossed my mind thinking about the new stadiums, is that, and I want to get your opinion on this. I really like the way the Green Bay Packers do it, where they have Lambeau Field and they give it upgrades every however many years to keep it contemporary, and they just keep adding to that. And it's like a community thing. And I wish they would do that with Paycor Stadium. Like, just keep elevating it. It doesn't have to be some like futuristic, like jukebox kind of thing, like the Raiders or the Titans or the Cowboys or whatever, because it's an outdoor stadium. It's got an interesting interesting design. It looks cool from the outside. It's once you get under the interior and you kind of see all the facilities and everything where you're like, this isn't that great. It feels very generic, very concrete. And I hope that they just keep spending money to elevate current Paycor Stadium, kind of like what Green Bay did with their football stadium. I would really enjoy that. I don't know if that's feasible because of the way the stadium trend is going, but what do you think about that?
I agree. I think if they would take the money and invest in it, like you said, hey, it's a contemporary stadium. I think the Bengals I think that would probably be cheaper for them to try to pull off. I think that would be easier for potentially money to be funded for them than trying to rebuild a stadium. In terms of a move, I hate the idea of it being in Mason, Ohio. I think it'd be hilarious if the Cincinnati Bengals were actually playing in, Newport, Kentucky. I love that idea as a Kentuckian. That's hilarious to me.
That would be so funny. And honestly, I need not to cut you off, but I do think that is.
I think that's more feasible.
I think it's probably more feasible. Now, Mason makes sense because they have Kings Island and the where they play the Cincinnati Open, which is like a major tennis tournament. So they're kind of building up an area out there where that could happen because it's But anyway,
it's just such a long distance. I think you're adding, not that I think if you're a diehard, you're a diehard, but I think, like, let's say for me or where we grew up, if you're like, oh, I'm going to go to a Bengals game for fun. Potentially, it's another barrier for some people having to go all the way up to Mason, Ohio for that. It's like, well, you're tacking on definitely some more time. I think in terms of the Kentucky side, it's like, well, it's not Cincinnati, but neither is Mason. But at least it's right there. The logistics have not changed really at all. You're just crossing the river one way or another. And I definitely think one of those cities would be like, okay, hey, talk to the governor. Yeah, let's do that, because Kentucky has shown the willingness to invest in sports in terms of, like, let's say the Kentucky Motor Speedway, which has unfortunately not worked out for the state at all. But I think this could be a way for potentially Kentucky to pull in some really great revenue in for the state. And I think they would welcome it with open arms if it became at least a talking point.
Yeah, I do think you could have. You know, I can't talk. You know what it makes me think of is, and this isn't a 1-to-1 comparison, but it's the Bears and the Gary, Indiana thing. It's the Chiefs moving to Kansas City, Kansas kind of deal. It's like creating leverage because that is a real possibility. There's way more. I don't think a lot of people in Ohio understand this because they're like, well, there's the state of Kentucky will dole out for something like that. Genuinely, I do believe that. And there's more open land in Kentucky now. There's more open flat land in Ohio, but I don't know. I think it makes a little more sense in Kentucky, but that's just me saying that.
I feel
like
you
biased.
Would have additional expenses in Mason because you would have to add more infrastructure, and then choose your place across the river. And it's like, well, for the most part, the infrastructure's already there. We just got to have the plot of land to build the stadium because the parking doesn't change. It's just you park on the Cincinnati side, walk over. I mean, you will definitely have to add some, but in terms of additional costs, it's going to be much cheaper in Kentucky than moving up to Mason.
And I would have said, and I know I've said this in our group chat before, I would have been more. I used to think that the Bengals could leave Cincinnati, the area, up like just away and go somewhere else. I used to kind of subscribe to that and thought it was a little more. I just don't think that's really in the cards now. I think they're going to be in this area if they build a new stadium. It's whether they move from town to Mason or south of Florence or wherever. I think that's kind of where that's heading. Now, they just re-upped again on their stadium lease, but I think the perfect place for it is where it's at, which is why I'm keen on the idea of continual upgrades.
I agree.
Once they build that new bridge, because Covington is getting better, like there's a lot of money coming into here. I think they could finish the banks, finish building that out, continue tweaking Paycor, keep it outdoor stadium, make it interesting. They just finished building the new convention center or renovating that. And what I'd really like to see them do is build an indoor practice facility next to Paycor Stadium. To me, there's ways for them to financially do this and keep that stadium nice and interesting in its own way without having to shell out $4-5 billion to build a stadium out in the suburbs. And I think there's nothing quite like driving into Cincinnati from like 75 and seeing that kind of on the horizon, and you see the Bengals stadium pop up over the roadway. Like, I think that's really pretty. I think it's good that they have it there, but I just want to get your take on I'll call it the Lambeau Field strategy of upgrades like that.
I agree. I think that is the best place because and all of our listeners is familiar with the location of it. But for whatever reason, if you're not familiar, you just haven't been downtown in a long time, it's just so nice to have basically one end of the strip of downtown there's the Bengal Stadium, and at the other end of the big strip, you got the Red Stadium. It's all on the same street. It's super cool. They have all these businesses in between with restaurants and different shops and whatnot. I think it's iconic because you are 100% right. You're coming down the cut in the hill, especially at nighttime. Let's just say if it was, you're in the season where baseball game and maybe the Bengals game's going on at the same time, and you're just seeing downtown lit up with the with one center there. It needs to stay where it's at. I agree. I think money wise, it's better just to make your upgrades there. However, whoever's paying for it is always the conversation with it, especially when it comes to the Bengals. And I'm not saying that just to belittle the Bengals. That's probably like more than half of the teams in the entire league. But owners are not going to shell out for their own things. They're going to try to get somebody else to pay for it first. That's how it always goes.
Yeah.
But I agree. Stick with it. I like it where it's at. You'll figure out a way.
I think if you got anything else, I think that's it. Great podcast, everyone listening. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and check out our channel. Go ahead and hit the notification bell as well to get updates on when we post. I believe is this going up today or tomorrow?
The goal is to go up today.
Okay.
I don't have to do anything till like 6:30, so it should be up by 5 o'clock at the latest.
All right. All right, everyone. Well, have a great Super Bowl Sunday. Go Seahawks. Screw the Patriots. Logan, I will see you next week.
Have a good weekend, man. Go Seahawks, and thank you all for listening. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next episode.